The conference will be recorded, as you found out just now, so that you can review the content, possibly in staff training, and we'll send the link in the coming weeks. The conference is sponsored by University of Toronto, Pakistan Institute for Living and Learning, Center for Addictions and Mental Health in Toronto, Manchester Global Foundation and University of Manchester, Central African Institute of Living and Learning, Global Mental Health and Cultural Psychiatry Research Group, Global Center for Research on Mental Health Inequalities, Mercy Care NHS Foundation. And we thank you, each of your groups, for this support. We also acknowledge Sick Kids in Toronto, which holds the intellectual property on learning through play. After each presentation, we hope to have about 5 minutes for questions or discussion. During the presentations, you're welcome to put your questions into the chat box. If we do not have time for the questions, hopefully the presenter will get back to you with their comments on your question at a later time. Thank you to the Conference Planning Committee, and especially Rabia Fahad, Dr. Naseem Chaudhry, and Dr. Nusrat Hussain. Rabia has been the primary organizer of this conference and has done an outstanding job for this second year. She's a research associate and clinical psychologist. Professor Naseem Chaudhry is joint chair of this conference. She is CEO of Pakistan Institute of Living and Learning, Associate Director, Global Mental Health and Cultural Psychiatry, Professor of Psychiatry, Dow University of Health Services, Head of Psychological Medicine, Remedial Center Hospital. Professor Nusrat Hussain is also joint chair of this conference. He is Professor of Psychiatry, Director of Research, Global Mental Health, Division of Psychology and Mental Health, University of Manchester, Director, Research and Innovation, Global Center for Research on Mental Health Inequalities, Mercy Center Care, NHS. Welcome to you folks, and you will hear from Rabia periodically and Professor Naseem and Professor Nusrat over the conference time. I'm delighted to introduce our first speaker. Sorry, I just lost my notes there for a moment. Just 1 second. Maya Gayatonde is our first speaker, and you'll have to forgive me for giving her special attention. She was our first Learning Through Play partner and in India, and has taught the group so much over the 25 years of our very wonderful relationship. She's the Honorary General Secretary and Managing Trustee of Balamandir Kamaraj Trust, a premier social welfare organization dedicated to the shelter, care, and education of infants and young children in difficult circumstances and from socioeconomically weaker sections of society. Maya has spearheaded the launch of Learning Through Play program in India, as well as its expansion from the Balamandir Institution to other government and non-government organizations and schools across India. She has also developed the Joy of Parenting, Early Childhood Care and Development Training Program for ECCD professionals, health and community workers, creche and kindergarten teachers, and NGOs working in various parenting environments. She has led the development of the multilingual parenting and ECCD resource materials, as well as the establishment of the Pan-India Network for Information on Parenting. Maya is a consultant to the government of Tamil Nadu on early childhood education and policy. She is a Learning Through Play master trainer and co-author of Living in Harmony, a value education series for school children. Maya, it's so good to have you here. Go ahead with your presentation. You're muted, Maya.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew, for for that wonderful introduction. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all of you, and of course a warm namaste from India. As you can see, we have put in what we're talking today is about the parenting innovations in LTP with the Indian context. We've had 25 years to grow with LTP, and we're still finding new things that we can do with it. I would just like to say the first, Rabia, will you just go to the next slide? Well, this just says about the Balabandir Kamaraj Trust, started in 1949, and we are going to be 75 next year. The institution is going to be 75 next year. And the BMRF is an outreach wing. If you see the last wing of Balabandir Kamaraj Trust, and of course, we are happy to say the first international partner of learning through play. Now, what I'm going to do, there are things written down and written in big print, and I do believe that Rabia will share with everybody. So I will be telling you just those very important things you can see clearly on your screen, but that really needs to be highlighted from the Indian context. Now, the next one would be, I would like to say that there has been a specific parenting philosophy, which we called initially LTP plus India. And in that first philosophy, the first thing that we looked was the next one, the next slide. Okay, one must be defined parents. And if you see very clearly that it includes all of us. If anybody feels left out, then we are there in society. So we defined Papa, and in India, the term Amma or Ai means mother, mama, what we would say mother. So you have the relatives, the elders, neighbors, everybody's involved. The next point was that we made parenting a rights issue. The child has the right to an informed parent. And that I feel LTP is doing a wonderful job. And we have now started from conception. And then the parent, on the other hand, has the right to information on child development. This was, I think these are two rights that came in, and an all-inclusive definition which goes beyond caste, creed, status, and environment. So then we go to the next part of the philosophy, which I would like to say that in India, we introduced what we said, a life cycle approach to parenting. Now, you will see many things there, but I would like to start from the point on the left-hand side where it says raising the adolescent. Now, we do know we work with adolescents because we do believe that anything that we talk about future parenting has a lot to do with friendship versus relationship, which could lead to a child, to the birth of a child, and then whether that child can be parented. We have many cultural practices around puberty in India which lend themselves to this knowledge. We go to the next stage in the life cycle approach where we've said you plan for parenthood, and that is celebrating pregnancy. There are many beautiful cultural activities and ideas around the country where we actually celebrate the whole process of parenting. You will find in these sort of oval-shaped ones that what we have done are what is there in the Indian context, and in the rectangular squares are things, squares are all the ideas that came into us through LTP. Then you have from planning for parenthood, welcoming the baby, infant, showing love and care. There's tremendous traditional literature going back into the 10th or 12th century, or even the Vedic age, where there's talked all about care of an infant. Then we come to nurturing the child. And once you nurture the child, you're back again in raising the adolescent. One very important in this entire approach was that we made a title saying that kindergarten is actually only an extension of parenting. Not really. We talk about school readiness, we talk about, so long as we're only talking about the child enjoying and learning through play, then we are in kindergarten, because that's really what kindergarten is. However, of course, in India, we've gone very much into formal learning, even at that young age, and that is something. On the right-hand side, you will say that we learned SPRUC, which was PRAP. The next one, Rabia. Rabia, the next one. Okay. Now you see, this was the holistic development. We developed the word SPRUC. Now, inadvertently, we started saying spruce, till we were corrected that you can't say spruce without an E. And that E made all the difference to our thinking, because we suddenly realized that you think of the child's sense of self, physical, relationship, understanding, and communication within its environment. The impact of the environmental factors on the child's development is especially very critical, not only in low-income settings, but in all settings. So India has a special thing that where the E, and then you will see all the various E's that we were able to move in these 25 years, and how we tailored or made more appropriate all these. And we've just put this is a little thing that we have, and of course you can see most of whatever it is, but later on you can share, and then okay. Now after that, the next thing that we did was we went in very much into the community, center-based and community-based approaches, focusing through networking with other NGOs, government across the country, and respecting and being sensitive to language, something we learned from LTP, which was already in so many languages when it came to India. And then we created a sort of model. Can we go to the next, please? Yeah. So when we come to this, I would like to say, it says very clearly around the center that LTP India worked with government, mainly two governments in great depth. One was the Tamil Nadu government, the other was Maharashtra, helped us to develop specific tools. And there was, therefore, it came to what we would say South Indian approach, or even to the look and the North Indian. Then we went in with the NGOs. Below you will see all the various kinds of NGOs with whom we have worked, to whom we have taken this. And then you have the school area through the PTA, through the kindergarten, in-service training institutions. Then here, wherever we worked, there was the urban, the tribal, and the rural areas and difficult circumstances. And this was the kind of LTP India has spread over. It's taken us 25 years, but we have spread. And we now are more confident. Now, I'm just going to show you after just some pictures. It makes a lot of difference to see. If you see the central picture, this is from a migrant worker working on construction sites. There's a law that says that, mothers can bring their babies. And if you see those are little, if you see those big pipes that are there and those little sort of, cradle, it's just tied there. And there's a little baby inside that. And then you have the women, tribal women here, you have the rural. When we say rural, Anganwadi center means the center for children, learning center for young children. It is across the rural areas of all India. And when I told them in Canada for many years that the first time we made a tool for 30,000 Anganwadi centers in Tamil Nadu, I got a clap. And then I said, no, but that's only one of 25 states. And I'm talking to you about one state. So you can imagine the number of zeros we have to reach before we can do that. However, we've reached larger number of zeros now, but it's not that. It's that people are becoming more aware. Okay, and then these were parenting programs we did during the tsunami. We did it during the earthquakes. Now you think, what was all of this? It's just that it helped parents to handle the devastation, the emotional devastation, the physical devastation that children went through, even in the most difficult circumstances. So we tailored those messages to help them through their difficult circumstances. All of this is well recorded, and we're fascinated ourselves what all we could. So then there you will see we were the street dwellers, and then we say the rat pickers. That is, believe it or not, this is like a big, and if you can see there sitting right on the roadside is Hema, talking about with the flip chart in front of her, the flip chart we created right there, talking to all of these, and they're rat pickers. That is their livelihood. And then of course there were women's group and community development. We talked about community health. We worked with community health areas. The column, more about it later. Then we used street plays. And then we played this wonderful brain game, which I hope we can take a video of and show you how to explain to people just with ribbons, and the brain and the synapses. All right. Then we went into community-based parenting we've done. We've done in rural Karnataka, in the districts of Tumkur and Kolar. I would like very much for you to just know that that was the time we really learned that even villages which are have a majority of one religious group, they love the child, they do the same thing, but there could be small differences. So it helped us to understand why, because of a religious belief, people did that. And I mean, they changed maybe certain methods, but there was always love in that. We found, of course, we did find many things, many of the activities or some of the traditions, and we were able to talk them into understanding things new. But, you know, this fact that you can do it, we did this. This was a great learning from the Karnataka project. Yes, and then of course here are some pictures, the Karnataka project. This project has Hema completely, she did it for us, and you can see her there among the people, and you can see the way she's been in all the areas. And then, yes, go ahead to the next one, that's fine. And then the next one we did was in Tamil Nadu. Now there's a lot of difference. There in Tamil Nadu, this was in partnership with UNICEF, and we just highlighted the numbers. This is 2011-13. In fact, soon after we continued our partnership with Delcrest, but not for projects. What is important was that we developed that baseline, and we then developed a home visiting manual, and we started to refine what we call the child observation record, COR. And I'll tell you more about the COR, because now COR has had its own journey. And, you know, we've now linked it up with, okay. So this was some pictures for you to see of the Tamil Nadu team. There, these are organized, these are games we specifically play, and activities done by the children. Yes, pictures just give you that relief from all the words that you have to listen to and to read. Then we have done this one particular community-based parenting program, which is in its 10th year. Okay, this year is going to be the 10th year, 23-24. It has been supported. It's a CSR project, and we have been working towards 500 families, 10 villages right now, but the next slide tells you. Rabi, just go to the next slide. Yes. So this is how it grew. First, it was just ICDS center, then home-based, and right now, if you see, we're looking at expanding the impact, but now working directly with the community and not with a center. And so there is a lot of involvement with the village elders, the government, what we call the Panchayat Raj. They're the administrators of the village, and that is something which we have really loved doing. Yes, you can go to the next. Am I too fast, or is that enough? Because it's okay. Can I go at this pace? That's all right. Okay, fine. Now I would like to tell you just one thing specific. These are of course pictures. It's lovely to see pictures. You see what's really happening, and it's all happening with the learning through play and our adaptive tools. If you see the very last picture at the bottom, you see one young gentleman, one young man standing there. He's our first male field coordinator. And believe it or not, the number of fathers who are now attending because there's a man talking to them about parenting, it really talks to you about how, you know, gender is something that we feel very happy. He's a young father himself, so he really took to it. And it's so the women listen to him, the men also have started now coming. He's doing a lot of work right in this Gumatipundi project. Now, this particular slide tells you something more about the Indian context, because I put it down as women's empowerment and how the community can be empowered. And therefore, I say first, not only you educate the woman in her role as mother, prenatal, all of that important, but you look at the community side of it. We have the self-help groups, SHGs, where they come together for a financial reason. Okay, they are self-help and they're completely commercial, but we are talking to them as though they are the mothers, the aunts, the elder sisters, the grandmothers, and the mothers-in-law. So you completely change the way they are looking. They come together to do some business activity, but you tell them that, hey, take this message forward because that's your relationship. When you're stressing the role of the father, we think we should talk to the father, but we are now taking the program right to the adolescent boys. They are the young men who really also need to start understanding what fatherhood means. I know it's difficult, but they're listening, and it's fantastic how wonderful. And then we look at all the men and say, hey, you're an elder brother, an uncle, you're a father, you're a grandfather. And that's why I come to you with the parenting program. And suddenly they look at themselves quite differently. Then you have the role of the family member. Can we just go back to that just for a second? Yeah. Okay. The role of the family member. Yeah. So in that, what you do now, we are looking at the Panchayat Raj, that is the administrators, the village, the community elders, and saying that all the women and children are part of a larger family of your community. And if you want your village or your community to develop, you have to invest in this, in the child. And suddenly it's starting to make sense that the child is really someone who's going to become the adult later. Most importantly, educating employers. There's tremendous need to do that. I think it's true all over the world, because women will carry the child, pregnancy, then the early part of it, breastfeeding laws. The law is there in every country. Labor welfare laws are beautifully written, but we need to do a lot of more work about the empowering the employers in the community. So that's the way we looked at this particular. Yes, thank you. Just to the next one. Okay, so then we've also done two projects with Grand Challenges Canada. These are there. Dhwani has put the, I get all the help I need from everybody else. They're all, so that was cluster randomized trial using information technology, but it was increasing the involvement of fathers in childcare. And it was a very, very well received. There's so much to learn, and now so much that you can do, but once you can see, it's all on the public domain. That was so we advised that group, IFMR. Yes, the next one. Key learnings were that it is difficult, but very necessary to motivate fathers, but flexible engagement strategies. That is a very important thing that we have to think about. It's a small beginning in the trajectory of the behavior change that we are wanting to happen, have involvement of men, but it is something that we learned a lot of just by working with that project. And IFMR has, of course, done. Then we went into another one with the Christian Children Fund of Canada, which is now called Child Believe in India, and Speech, their organizational partner. And then they talked in terms of the first 1,000 days. So that's literally from conception up to the second year. So there were antenatal, postnatal, but the interesting part of this was, and Lakshmi is very, Lakshmi Gopal, my partner who's today, there are 55 animated videos which talk about that stage, and it's all now available in the public domain. And you can use it anywhere. It's not only Indian, it's very clear. Literally, I think less than 1 minute videos, 55 of them, and they are also on the day. All the interventions based on spruce and LTP adapted materials. Yes, sir. Now, this is a very important thing because we all do CAPS, KAP. Okay, you say knowledge, attitudes, practices, and then you tick and say that, yes, the knowledge they've had. Now, this is something I'd like very much to focus on. Knowledge of parenting levels you can give. Because they have knowledge, attitudes can change and will change. But practice is always difficult because you're not isolated Robinson Crusoe on an island. You're in a community, and unless the attitudes and the knowledge of the entire community changes, however convinced you are about the practices, following them within a family, within a community, within a village at large is going to be difficult. So I've always looked at the KAP study with these three particular focuses and understanding of that. We've done a lot of cultural adaptations, and the next you could see our Indian motives there. So would you just go to the next? So this was our very first one, when you can see this was the first thing we did in the year 2000, we developed this parenting for early years for the government of Tamil Nadu. The next one, these are just everything is available and you can see it on our website and everything. Please go ahead and just show the next one. All right. So this was 1999, 2000, interestingly, and then it went to the All India level in 2000, and recently in 2021-22, the government of Tamil Nadu, which had 30,000 Anganwadi centers, now has 55,000 Anganwadi centers, and they sought our permission to print 1 million copies of this, and it is spread across the state. Interestingly, not for the worker at the childcare center, but a new program by which the tool is going to empower the community and the villages where this particular childcare center is. And the Anganwadi worker, when she goes out to her visiting the community, she's going to use this tool just to show it to them, because it's very much to do with their look. It is both in Tamil, of course, English we have, but it is in Tamil. So after 22 years, it was fantastic that they still found such great use for similar. We've added on a few things to it. Yes, sir. The next one, please.
A few more minutes, Maya. A few more minutes. Okay.
Yes, that's all. I'm only coming to the end of that. Okay. So now, of course, we've added on sections on brain development, pregnancy. All of these are there. Yes, can we go to the next? Now, I'm just showing you visuals of what the inside of the calendar looks like. So it's all there for you in English and Tamil. Yes, let's see. And the headings are very clear, but it's nice to see the visual to see. We have this brain development chart we developed because we felt synapses was, things that were joined in. And this idea of this column, what we call it, the cultural tradition for all in our homes, in all the functions and the festivals. This is part of it. It's explanatory. It can help you to teach all about the connections that happen in the brain. The next one is we developed pictures for the pregnancy, the care of the mother, antenatal, postnatal care. We felt that became a very important part of LTP, not to start only at birth. Now, this is something which, and of course, the next one is the 3 to 6, which is now going to come out also, the indigenized version. That's going to focus a lot on school readiness and others. I will show you pictures of it that will help you to understand. Yes, just see the way we are looking at it. So there's health and hygienic habits for the 3 to 6 years, because it's not age, it's not 3, 3.5, 4. Between 3 to 6, this is all the child should definitely be able to learn. He's going out of his home or whatever, she's going out and they're learning. And all right, then we have school readiness. Very importantly, please just look at the headings. What we've done is we've used our visuals, and one is speaking and communication, and we are very focused on pre-reading, pre-writing, and pre-math, because that is not given enough importance in the Indian educational context. And you can see these are the indigenized pictures that we've done. Yes, go ahead. We'll just show you how. And then we develop what we call steps with visuals. So you can see the growth of SPRUC. And you can also look at it vertically and know what SPRUC for that particular age group is. So that was done for birth to 3. There's another one where we've developed appropriately with words, 3 to 6. Because at 3 to 6, you really need to know a lot more about that activity, because it's also center-based. Yes, go ahead. So there is, of course, this indigenized version. And please to note that this 3 to 6 is going to be not only the home, but also the center-based. Because I do believe that one of the things that parents must know is what to expect from a early early childhood center, or what we call kindergarten, which they send their child. So that knowledge will be coming out of this. And the next one. And then here you see, I would just like you to say, when we talked about family involvement in the community, so you can see from the first picture, you can see distinctly two religious groups, but they are helping the child to learn that. Here you see the father's involvement. Interestingly, the picture below, it's a child helping the mother, but for India, the mother being helped by the boy child is a very important message to give. That it's not, so gender is a very important thing. We had a set of parenting flashcards. I just got just a few minutes and that's it. Can we just, this was what we converted the original LTPC pictures to look to for the Maharashtra project. This came 2006 when Ramani and they all came, and so just please, and it's open-ended, thought-provoking, no words. So you look at the picture and you just learn. Okay, can you just show us, the next would show you the pictures. You'll see different colors, 14 colors for each stage. And it is a replica of the pictures of the learning through play. We just use them as flashcards. You can see there's absolutely no word. Very interesting. You get a group of fathers, you give 20 pictures where the father is doing something, and every father looks at the picture and he tells you what the father is doing. He learns a lot more than any amount of training that you can give him. And we found this, people who are unlettered don't find it threatening. If you just see, we've just given you what the original was like. I'd like you to refer. Yes, we've made some small changes where you saw the snow. We've put in sand because except for Kashmir, we don't have snow anywhere in India. But the message, no, just a minute, 1 minute. Can you just go back? The message was nothing to do with the snow. It was about play outdoors. Here you've got a father and a daughter. Now the daughter is always in the kitchen. So when we changed it with the father, with the son, and both the men doing the work in the house. It helps you to, just make that particular message of parenting. So the same thing we've done. Yes, go to the next one. So of course, these are the pictures just for you to know all the different kinds of things. See, the word is caring for the mother, welcoming the girl child. And of course, father's involvement. You can see the mother is gone for a meeting and the father is home looking after the children. Yes, just go to the last. I think we're almost at the last. Yeah. This is just the thing that 10th century Tamil literature I've written there. Lakshmi Gopal is with us. Andrew will remember she made a presentation in 2008. It was fantastic when she discovered these are pictures of early childhood as described in 10th century literature. So I thought that was something that you would just love to see. And just the last one, and that is the center and home-based tool. We developed a child observation record as early as 2009-10. It has been, and there it talks about ABC, excels in skill activity, skill is emerging, skill is yet to develop. Interestingly, I think the first time we're going a little more professional in India. That particular tool in 2022 is now linked to IMOW, and we are going for a process of validation of the tool. Yes, so that is it. And the last one would be the home visiting manual, for which we developed the present home visiting manual along with the look-see checklist of the Nipissing developmental scale, which we learned. And yes, and after that, I think.
Well, Maya, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
You have such wonderful resources, and we should let everyone know that this presentation, Maya's presentation, is available to you if you want to refer to it. And
ask any questions at any time. You can just share, and we'll be happy to.
There's a couple questions that have been asked, but you will have to get to those at another time. And one is around the taboo of fathers doing in household work. But you can Robbie will connect you with the person who had that question.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I've gone over my time.
No, I think we took a few minutes, a little longer getting introduced at the very beginning.
No, that's fine.
Thank you very, very much, Maya.
It was a pleasure to share with all of you, and would be happy to share anything further that anybody wants. Rabia, our emails are available, and you can share it with everybody, and they can ask.
I think that that you all will find getting a connection with Maya and Balamandir to be very helpful in your work. And thank you again, Maya. Naseem is going to introduce the next speaker. Naseem, you go ahead.
It's my absolute pleasure to introduce Dr. Minna Hussain. Now, I have known Minna for a number of years. I've seen her go through her medical school, her psychiatry career, and I feel immensely proud when I now introduce her as an assistant professor, adult psychiatry and health systems at University of Toronto. She's also a staff psychiatrist at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. Minna has a huge interest in creative arts, and she uses and utilizes this to raise awareness and address the stigma attached to mental illness. Minna is an award-winning producer of many short films, which have been officially selected at several international film festivals, public engagement, and academic events. Over to you, Minna, and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me at this really important event. Yeah, thank you. I was just going to ask about sharing my slides. Thank you for that introduction. So I'll be talking today about a topic that is very important to me. So I've got a research interest in parenting, and I work as a staff psychiatrist in general adult psychiatry in an inpatient unit. So a lot of my client group is individuals who have serious mental illnesses. So I work in an inpatient unit and across various other settings in the emergency department and in an early psychosis outpatient center. So I come across a lot of individuals who have SMI. So what are serious mental illnesses? So a serious mental illness is defined as a mental disorder which significantly impairs the functioning of an individual. So these include illnesses such as psychosis, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and major depression. And often the client group that I come across who experience SMI are parents. And it's very common. 4% of parents across the world actually experience an SMI. Psychosocial factors, psychosocial stressors, we know can lead to adverse outcomes in healthy parents. Psychosocial stressors including social factors, social burden, emotional burden, financial burden. These can often have, can lead to pretty difficult outcomes such as attachment difficulties with your child, social exclusion, and emotional difficulties in children as well. And unfortunately, we see a high rate of parent suicidality in this group of people. But it's not all doom and gloom. Sorry, can you go back? It's not all doom and gloom. Parenting can also be protective. It can be a source of pride for individuals, a sense of purpose, and can provide a lot of hope for the future. There's limited research at the moment for parents' experiences, parents with SMI, and looking at their experiences. And the focus has largely been on looking at supporting the children and other family members and the wider community. So I had a look at some of the research that has been done. So I'll talk very briefly because I know I'm short for time and I want to show a film at the end of this as well. But there was a meta-analysis that was conducted. Sorry, are my slides?
Sorry, give me a second.
Yeah. Thank you. So I'll just briefly run through a little bit of the research. So I looked through some of the research, and there was a meta-analysis that was conducted by Dolman et al. In 2013, and that looked at maternal experiences and the views of healthcare professionals. This study is over 10 years old, and it looked at at the maternal experiences, and the experiences of fathers weren't included in the study. It also included postpartum psychosis, which, though it's important, is a discrete illness on its own. Then there's another study by Oyserman et al., which was published in 2000, and that looked at mostly low mood and depression, and only a small proportion of it was serious mental illness. Next slide, please. A more recent systematic review and meta-analysis was published by Harries et al. In 2003. And this looked at the inclusion criteria was English and German speakers. It was generally qualitative data, and it included parents across the spectrum. So mothers, fathers, stepfathers, foster parents, all who experienced SMI. And it focused mostly on the parents' experiences. So this was 29 studies in 14 countries, and it included over 562 parents, both mothers and fathers. It was still majority mothers' experiences. 12 were both, and there was one study that was focused on solely on fathers. And these were majority in high income countries. There was one study that was in South Africa, but there was no data actually from South Asian countries. So there was a lot of themes that came up from this study, which I would love to talk about in detail. A lot of themes about parenting, parents feeling constrained, feeling compared to perfect parenting standards. One of the quotes that I'll briefly touch on was particularly touching, and it was around stigma and fears of rejection. Parenting is a time where people often feel judged for their practices, and this has been known to be heightened in people who experience mental disorders. So this is a quote by a mother: "If mothers knew I had a mental illness, they might not let their children play with my children," which I thought was a particularly touching quote. So I wanted to briefly touch on some of the work that our team is doing. We're looking at conducting or trialing a parenting intervention for this client group, and we talked through the previous talked through learning through play, which is a parenting intervention, and this is a combination of learning through play and a culturally adapted CBT therapy for individuals with schizophrenia. Yeah, can you skip on to the next slide? So the role of parenting is well established in maternal depression, and it's parenting interventions, and it's been well studied and well documented in that. But there's very little work that's been shown about parenting interventions in people suffering with schizophrenia. So that's an area that's really important that we're looking at right now. Yeah, and this is a little bit about stigma, and and that NICE guidelines as well does recommend the use of parenting interventions in order to improve child outcomes and reduce this cycle. Yep, so our plan is to test this intervention with parents in schizophrenia to assess its feasibility and acceptability. Yep, okay, go ahead. Yeah, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. So I'm not going to go into too much detail over here because it was really well communicated in the previous presentation about learning through play, but learning through play, just in a nutshell, learning through play is a parenting therapy, which has been tested effectively in mothers and is currently being trialed in fathers with postnatal depression. And we know that CBT is effective for psychosis in order to help individuals work with their symptoms, such as working with their symptoms of hallucinations, delusions. It really important in preventing relapse for these individuals, especially when going through this important transition into parenting. So it's going to be divided into two phases. So there's going to be a qualitative phase, which is important, interviewing the participants to see their experiences with this intervention. And a quantitative phase as well. And again, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but there are rating scales that we'll use to test the effectiveness of this. And Rabia, would you be able to put up the film that I sent across?
Dr. Mina, if you would be able to share your screen, because I'm not able to access that video through the password.
Okay, sure. I sent you the recent password. Is that working or?
Okay, I would need to check.
Okay, otherwise I can share my screen. How do I do that?
Rabia has to give you permission to share the screen.
Okay.
When you have permission, you can share yours.
I'm checking if I can share with the new password, otherwise I can provide you.
Yeah, so this is a film that I'll just give you a little bit of a background about it. I really think a lot of the work is important, but a big way is to engage the community is through the use of the arts. And I could see from the previous talk that there was a lot of really informative resources, and I'd be really interested to see the animations as well. So this is a short film, which is set in Karachi in Pakistan, and it's about parenting and some of the difficulties that, that occur during parenting.
मजाक बनाया हुआ है। आज कम से कम अच्छी माँ बनने की एक्टिंग ही कर लूं।
एक जूस भी भाई।
काम करे मेरे लिए भी जूस ले ले।
ओके बाबा, सबके लिए जूस। हैप्पी?
हाँ, डेजर्ट भी देख लेते हैं ना।
हाँ देख लेते हैं।
ये वाला खाएंगे?
ठीक है, ठीक है,
ठीक है।
चलें। आपने ऑर्डर लिया?
जी जी, बस मैं भी लेके आता हूँ।
ओके।
जूस भी बना।
सना किधर है?
पता नहीं, शाम से गायब है, इसीलिए तुम्हें फ़ोन कर रही थी। पता नहीं कैसी बेहिस माँ है, इस तरह से घर को बच्चे को छोड़कर चली गई। कई दफ़ा फ़ोन किया है मगर फ़ोन बंद जा रहा है। उसके कोई घर वाले हैं शहर में?
नहीं, उसकी कराची में कोई फैमिली नहीं है। हो सकता है कहीं बाहर गई हो, थोड़ी देर में आ जाएगी। ओ, शुक्रिया, आपने नूर का ध्यान रखा। मैं आपका एहसान कभी नहीं उतार पाऊंगा।
कोई बात नहीं, बस इस महीने किराया वक्त पे दे देना। मुझे पता है कि तुम्हारे लिए अच्छा वक्त नहीं है।
सना, प्लीज वापस आ जाओ। मुझसे नहीं हो रहा। माफ कर दो यार, नहीं हो रहा मुझसे। प्लीज वापस आ जाओ। वैसे चली गई नींद तो सो गई। वैसे आपा ने घर खाली करने का कहा था, सुनिएगा मेरी बात।
Thank you, Mina. Boy, that's hard to watch that. My goodness. We appreciate very much the work you're doing, and we'll look forward to, I understand that you do more videos, and this is one of the things that you do. And we hope that you can somehow share this with the group. Appreciate that very much. Naseem is going to introduce our next speaker. and then we'll have a break.
It's with great pleasure, and it's really wonderful that we have Dr. Ala Alkhani with us. Ala is a humanitarian psychologist. She works at the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. She's also an honorary research associate at the University of Manchester. Ala is passionate about highlighting the significant role that caregivers play in protecting their children during crisis. She's a developer of numerous family skills resources. She's a global trainer of family skills programs and research methods, and she's conducted training in over 25 countries. Welcome, Ala, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Naseem, for the introduction, and hello, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be with you all. Let me start with how, Naseem, could you kindly share my slides?
Yes, I'm sharing.
Thank you, Rabia. Thank you so much. Okay, well, let me start with how I became involved in this area of family skills development in the humanitarian context and why I'm so passionate about it. In 2011, I was studying for a PhD at the University of Manchester with Professor Rachel Calum, who will be speaking shortly, my then PhD supervisor, but now a very good friend. And this was in the beginning of the conflict. And then the conflict grew stronger, and I am of Syrian heritage myself. And through the conflict, particularly early on, I lost many of my relatives in really horrifying ways. My husband is a trauma surgeon, and he would be away for many weeks on medical missions to Syria while I parented our then 2 very young children. And I would watch the devastating scenes on the TV, similarly to those that we're seeing in many parts of the world, including Ukraine, of mothers fleeing, of, no, slide before, please. Of mothers fleeing, of children looking incredibly scared, really heartbreaking images of extreme physical and mental health and mental tragedies. And I would just wonder, how are the caregivers coping? My husband would come back from his missions and would share physical trauma stories and also mental health tragedies. And I would wonder, if I was a parent in that context, how would I cope? How would I know how to support my children? What would I be able to access, if anything, in that context? And this really led me to change the context of my PhD to want to explore the needs of families affected by conflict and crisis and how to support them. So let's fast forward to where we are today. And what I hope to do in my presentation is to plant some seeds of hope that despite the really awful circumstances that caregivers and families globally face, there is so much that we can do to promote the mental health and well-being of children and their caregivers. And just to note that while my presentation will focus on evidence mainly on supporting the needs of families that have experienced extreme stress due to conflict and displacement, there is so much research that indicates a parallel in needs with families that have experienced other extreme stress contexts like a pandemic, a natural disaster, illness, or even community violence. So this is relevant to working with so many different kinds of families. So let me start by showing you a few photos that we can reflect on together. We have the first one in front of us now. So this first photo is one of many images of Syrians fleeing Aleppo in 2013. It's typical of many mass displacement contexts around the world, recently, similarly to Ukraine. We can see here fear, confusion, insecurity, a really horrible image. Now imagine being there as a civilian. What do you think is going to be going through your mind? Let's really take a moment to think about it. Could be a mother, a father, holding onto your child's hand really tightly. Where can I find safety? How can I keep my child safe? Will I be able to go home anytime soon? Where am I going to sleep? Is there access to healthcare because my child is bleeding? What am I going to eat? So we have basic necessities that need to be addressed first. Next slide, please. Similarly here, coming shortly, we will have an image from families fleeing the floods in Pakistan. Again, extreme insecurity and fear, and likely focus on survival. Next slide, please. Here we have images from the immediate aftermath of the earthquake in Syria and Turkey just 3 months ago, and we can see this common theme across these photos. Next, please. So how about this photo? So now we have refugees living in camps, having fast forwarded a few months since the last photo. Those basic needs of safety, shelter, medical care that they had at the beginning, we hope are now being met. But is this a normal, natural community where these families will be able to live their lives and thrive? Are these refugees going home anytime soon? Not likely. And the families that may have arrived here thinking they will be going home will begin now to realize that's probably not going to be the case. So this leads to feelings of entrapment, hopelessness, and as their options to leave and earn livelihoods and to seek better circumstances for themselves and their families begin to get smaller, families here, excuse me, it's here that we begin to see different mental health and family problems really begin to increase, like child abuse, substance misuse, physical and sexual violence. Next slide, please. So what about now? We have a photo here of refugees. These could be Syrian, Afghan, or Ukrainian refugees. These have now been resettled. Now, if this was you, what would you now need as a caregiver? They have a safe roof over their heads. Their immediate needs, such as shelter, food, and healthcare, are likely being taken care of. And they've reached the realization that they're not going to go home anytime soon. This is their new home. For many displaced families, their journey ends with being resettled in a high-income country like this. Let's go to the next slide, please. But for others, such as this image of Pakistan flood victims, they might remain internally displaced for many years after losing their homes. Now, caregivers respond to their children in many different ways when they find themselves under threat, compared to actually being in real danger for their lives. So under threat, families tend to become more warm, overprotective of their children even, but while in extreme circumstances of attack and displacement like war contexts, they can become less warm and harsher. And levels of parental stress are a really important driver of this. Distress and challenges experienced by caregivers can really compromise their parenting and their mental health and in their beliefs of self-efficacy. So we certainly can't predict what's going to happen to any family at any of the many different stages they might go through any humanitarian context. But we most certainly have a duty to provide them with all their possible physical, practical, and psychosocial services and needs that they might have. Next slide, please. So the family is a social institution that is so powerful in the lives of children, and we very often underestimate the role of the family in prevention of so many outcomes. Living through significant challenging context really entails many challenges for children and for their family, and has the potential for a significant impact on well-being, on mental health, both now and in the longer term. And the relationships that parents have with their caregivers is the primary most important factor in their future well-being. That's in their emotional and mental health development, and really significantly in reducing the likelihood of them becoming engaged in risky behaviors like drug misuse, criminal activity, and sexual experiences that might be harmful. Next, please. So all families in all contexts can benefit from, let's see, next slide, please. All families, no, the one before. All families in all contexts can benefit from family protective. I think we're missing a slide. Is there not one in between those two? It's fine, I'll just speak over it. So all families in all contexts can benefit from family skills resources that promote protective factors like communication, trust, problem-solving skills, and conflict resolution. And families that engage with parenting information are much more likely to have better mental health, physical and social outcomes in the future. But what about families experiencing parenting under significant stress or challenged circumstances? Families that are living through conflict, displacement, the aftermath of a natural or man-made disaster, families living in low-resource settings, or families going through a global pandemic like COVID, for example. Well, research on family skills implementation work tells us that families go through the same things or need the same things that they need outside of extreme stress contexts. But during extreme stress, they need these even more. They need to focus on relationships and how to promote these, how to strengthen family protective factors, how to deal with child and adult stress is really important. How to listen and communicate with children, the value of using both love and limits in our parenting approach, and ways to encourage positive behavior, and also techniques to discourage misbehavior. Next slide, please. When we specifically consider families that have experienced war and displacement, here the role of the caregiver is only even further magnified. Often it's the only support institution that remains when everything else is lost. But sadly, research tells us that children and families that have experienced conflict are even more likely to experience violent discipline, and children can be even more at risk, even though we know that children can be protected by warm, secure parenting. And this is why we have been focusing for many years now on developing parenting resources for families that have been facing such experiences. Next slide, please. So what are family skills resources? They're resources that aim to strengthen family protective factors, such as conflict resolution, the importance of listening and communicating, ways to encourage positive behavior, and also techniques to discourage misbehavior. They focus on relationship and behavior change and have a strong component of practice as well. And families that take part in family skills programs and engage in such resources are more likely to have better mental health, physical and social outcomes in the future. Next slide, please. Also, supporting families is very cost effective, with research showing a return of almost $10 for every dollar spent implementing family skills programs. And this is really important when we try to convince policymakers to invest in family skills programming. Next slide, please. So I mentioned as a starting point that a lot of the work I'm engaged in now roots back to my PhD research at the University of Manchester, when I conducted field research in refugee camps in Syria and Turkey, sitting with families in their tents and asking them how they were coping and what they needed support and help with in caring for their children. Next slide, please. And we found three main aims to this research. Caregivers reported really struggling to care for their children, watching their children change in their behaviors and in their emotions, and not knowing what to do about this. Bedwetting, thumb sucking, children becoming aggressive, more withdrawn, and caregivers themselves dealing with a huge amount of emotional challenges and a sense of loss of control. They had to deal with these challenges and still care for their children appropriately in very challenging environmental conditions. Parents told us that they were making real attempts at trying to get support or accessing support and advice on how to care for their children. But at that point, there simply was none available. The vital need was not prioritized nor funded. Next slide, please. So in response to this gap that we identified of a lack of family skills resources that are evidence-based and open sourced, over a number of years, Professor Calum and I collaborated with UNODC, and we still do, to provide a pyramid of interventions to promote strong family relationships within families and good mental health for children as a preventative strategy. And that's the important part. This is a preventative strategy. We brought these together with other brief resources and interventions, and we have a stepped model for parents caring for children through challenge settings. And we work around this model where at every level, families can be provided with skills dependent on how much resources the area they're in has and how much need there is. And these tools can be available to all of you because they're open access. And while many of you here might be familiar with other family skills programs, often they can be very costly to run in humanitarian contexts. This is where the materials in this model differ, because these are very easy to use and open access. Recognizing how all families can benefit from parenting information, so on a really universal level. We look at the bottom level here in yellow, at this universal level, and I'm going to kind of take you through each level very briefly. This bottom level is where very light touch resources sit, light touch parenting skills that can be distributed to all families very easily. Next slide, please. As an example, we developed and distributed a parenting information leaflet for families living in a conflict zone. I won't go into it too much. Professor Kalin will go through this shortly, but we disseminated this via inserting this into bread wrappers. And we had a really high engagement from families and a lot of global attention actually at the possibility of beginning to disseminate family skills resources through piggybacking onto existing humanitarian supply routes. Next slide, please. We have this leaflet now, which has basic parenting information as a recorded video to increase accessibility and also to meet the needs of low literacy that we find in many parts of the world. And this is being shared on social media platforms like WhatsApp, for example, or other platforms too. And we have another number of tools as well that sit at the bottom level of our model. We've developed some of these independently at UNODC and many others in collaboration with other agencies and groups like Parenting Tips led by Parenting for Lifelong Health, the WHO, the University of Oxford and others. And with information from very many different contexts now gathered here, sitting at this level of our model. We're at the really important stage now good stage where these evidence-informed tools are ready. And with every new emerging crisis, we're able to quickly make brief adaptations and additions to meet the needs informed by our field teams. And this was the case for the COVID-19 response, then Ukraine, and more recently, the Syria-Turkey response. And now we're working on adaptations of these resources for Sudan. So we've gone a long way from when we had no tools to where we are now to be able to have existing evidence-informed tools that we can adapt. Next slide, please. Feedback from caregivers who receive these lighter touch resources is always that they want more advice. So we move up to in our level now to the green level, which takes us to area where we have more resources and more stable environments. Here next slide, please. And here we have, we've developed a light touch intervention that consists of a parenting booklet and associated conversation group seminar. So parents receive a booklet that has key parenting skills demonstrated in a really simple and engaging way, like building parental confidence, self-regulatory skills, and enhancing child and family psychological well-being. They can also then take part in a 2-hour conversation group where they can have discussions led by a lay facilitator, and they can expand the topics in this booklet, and then they can normalize and engage with the topics in this booklet as well, and the challenges they might be having. And we have a number of these booklets, and we have some published research as well on these from Palestine for anyone who wants to have more information. Next slide, please. I'm not going to spend time in going into the themes of the booklet, I think because of time constraints, but for those of you who are interested, I'll put links to all of these resources at the end. Next slide, please. So the next level up in orange of our model sits multi-session programs. So as we go up our model, the programs are becoming more intensive. And we can only do these multi-session work when families, when we know that families are going to be in one place for the duration of the intervention. So here we can only provide these when families are slightly more stable, in more stable communities. Next slide, please. So one example of such program is the Strong Families program. And this is an evidence-based UNODC multi-session family skills intervention. It's a universal prevention intervention designed for families with the aim of improving parenting skills, child well-being, and family mental health. And in this intervention, children and caregivers attend together this 3-week program. Key features of this program are that it's designed for families living in challenged or humanitarian settings. It's developed ensuring it to be really brief, so we run over just 3 weeks, and it's really light. So it requires a very basic infrastructure that's really easy to mobilize and train. And the training is aimed at lay people from many different backgrounds. You don't have to be a psychologist or have any mental health background, really. And it's suitable for low resource settings, and it requires very minimal training. I run training myself in over 20 countries around the world with this program, and we have many published articles for anybody who's interested. Next slide, please. Again, I don't think we have much time to go into the details of the program, but we have caregiver sessions, child sessions, and we have family sessions. And I'll put up a leaflet in the chat of where you can find out more about these kinds of this information on this. As I said, we've had so much interest. Next slide, please. In this training and in this intervention and implementation, just in the last 6 months, we've trained in Sudan, Tunisia, Burkina Faso, Mauritania. And last week we were with the wonderful Pakistan PIL group, which I know some of you are in this meeting now. And this is a photo from our training last week. Rather than face-to-face, we utilized our online platform for this training. And we are now beginning to plan a randomized controlled trial in Pakistan of Strong Families, which will begin in the next few weeks. Next slide, please. Strong Families has a really strong evidence base now with multiple publications. And we use tools that explore child behavior, family functioning, and parenting. And here, as an example of one study we did with 72 Afghan children in Afghanistan, caregivers rated their child that was taking part in the study using the SDQ, which measures conduct disorders, hyperactivity, peer problems, what else? Emotional problems. And what you can see here is the total score on the SDQ. And you can see that children went from, on average, scoring in the high category of the scale, indicated by this orange color, to dropping comfortably to the average range, indicated by the green. And this is a really remarkable drop for a short 3-week session program. And what's really encouraging is that the results continue to improve as time passes. Next slide, please. It's no surprise then that caregivers also rated their parenting confidence and family adjustment as much greater at the end of the intervention after taking part. Here we specifically look at the results of children that initially scored in the very high category of the SDQ. And that was actually 41 out of the 72 children from the study. And here we can see that all of the children who started off as very high dropped to the close to average range on completion. So a really useful intervention that has so much interest globally. So back to our model now of interventions for children. So now we're moving up in our model. So what about interventions for, next slide, please? Yeah. One back, please, my apologies. Yeah. So back to our model, what about interventions for children who need more specific, tailored trauma recovery support due to living through a crisis and require trauma recovery? The tip of our model in red here, or pink, this is where this kind of trauma work will sit. And one of the benefits of utilizing the stepped approach that we've described is that by engaging families using lighter touch tools on the lower levels and on a universal approach, we're able to better identify who needs more support, who is really struggling, and who needs this more intensive trauma recovery work. Next slide, please. At the tip of our model sits the Children of War Foundation program called Teaching Recovery Techniques. Professor Kaling will go into this in much more detail in her intervention, in her presentation. But just to inform you that we adapted this very wonderful program that's evidence-based by adding parenting sessions to it, and have implemented this and trialed this in a number of countries now. So caregivers take part, so children take part in trauma recovery, while their caregivers also take part in parenting skills work. And we found really positive results. I'm actually halfway through running training right now for Syrian facilitators in Syria affected by the earthquake. I'm jumping back in the next hour to that training. And what we're finding is stories of multiple compounding trauma from children and from their caregivers who have experienced so much devastation. So for many children in Syria who were born into the horrors of war, then displacement, and are now living in the context and aftermath of the recent earthquake, there is so much need for such trauma recovery work, where caregivers are also supported with really essential caregiver skills as well. But Rachel can tell you the evidence behind this study. Okay, so next slide, please. So in summary, what we need to do is really make use of this really wonderful protective shield that caregivers can be for their children through their early development and through adolescence, and recognize the importance even more that caregivers have during really challenging and stressful times. And we can do this by ensuring that we give access to families all around the world to family skills resources, What we know is that caregivers are already really motivated and are making attempts at seeking support. And we know now from our years of research in this field that family skills programs can be delivered even when funds are very low and even without extensive support and training or without highly skilled staff who have a mental health background. But there's so much need to make resources light and have this really flexible approach to both training and delivery that I've described. And when we do this, we are reducing the negative effects that humanitarian contexts can have on caregivers and their children. And the UNODC resource pyramid that I just shared is really just one example of the way support can be conceptualized. There are other programs and really wonderful resources available, and many are linked through the UNODC resource page that I will share in the chat. So thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
What a wonderful presentation. We are being well served this morning in the conference with 3 wonderful presentations, and I know that we're heading for even more. And I'd like to, I think we take a break now for about 7 minutes or so, about 7 minutes, and so we can catch up. And then I think we might be getting part 2 of this with Rachel Calum after the break. And so I do take a break, and we'll be back in about 7 minutes then. Thank you. We'll keep the keep it open, the Zoom open here. Okay, thank you. Hello, Ala. Thank you so much for your presentation. You can probably see in the chat that there's quite a bit of interest in connecting with the information you have, and so I believe you're willing to share your presentation with the group.
Sure. Let me just go through my slides and potentially remove some of the photos because I don't have.
Yes.
I'm just to check I have consent for all the photos, but the majority of the slides should be okay to share. I'll edit it shortly and send it back to Rabia.
Yeah. It's not, you don't have to do it right away, but
Sure.
I can just tell from that there's a lot of people that want to.
Yeah. I'm putting up links to all the resources in the chat, so
Perfect.
everyone should have all the information. I mean, it's wonderful. The fact that everyone's engaging means that people want to help and use these open access resources. So that's really wonderful.
This is
So,
an
I'll be sharing them.
incredible gathering of people who are so passionate about what they're doing all over the world. And yeah,
Absolutely makes a difference.
I don't know whether you've met Lynn Jones or not, but
Not yet, but it will be a pleasure to connect.
it would be a good connection. You and her are cut from the same cloth, I think.
I very much look forward to her presentation.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Rabia, Alice said that she's making some changes to her presentation, and that'll be the one that she sends you, that it can be shared with others.
Yes, Andrew. I will share.
Yeah, I'll do the same if I may. Take out some of the pictures. It just makes it a smaller file to share.
Thank you, Rachel. Yes.
Oh, it's hard following Alla. She's so fabulous. Such good speakers today.
Well, she gave you credit for getting her
So
on the path.
It's being in Rachel's presence for all these years. It's rubbed off onto me. And I mean that completely seriously. One of my greatest inspirations, no joke.
You're very kind.
Well, I think that applies to many of us that who are in the group today. I see Lakshmi from India. I see Silvana from Paraguay, and so many, Hema from India, that being in the presence of each other, I think makes a huge difference over time and helps keep our passion warm and our focus on what's really important.
Particularly in one's junior years, when you're still, when you have a PhD supervisor who really nourishes and nurtures a passion that you might have, I think it's so important. So Rachel massively encouraged and facilitated this expanding in this area. So no, I'm very lucky.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
We get, of course, lots of news of all the terrible things happening around the world, but boy, this really puts another lens on it. It's important to hear it. Well, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, what's really valuable though is that once resources become known, then they can be shared very quickly and easily. So I had messages coming to me, people from relating to Sudan, and I was able to provide answers very quickly. Yeah. And UNODC are updating their resource page so that it'll be really accessible for people from Sudan. So that's really valuable.
What a change to where we were a few years ago, where there was nothing, and I mean nothing when we started out. There was so minimal anything evidence-informed, evidence-based, and now I feel like it's a very luxurious position. I wish we didn't have to be in this position where we needed these, but sadly we do. And it's wonderful that we can very quickly respond to any crisis now. with some really, really wonderful evidence-informed and evidence-based tools now. So
Yes.
the field has come a long, long way.
And this idea about the, with the leaflets through bread wrappers and the humanitarian, I mean, that's just amazing.
I forgot to mention actually that Professor Nusrat actually was a big supporter of this project in the beginning, and he himself disseminated, I can't remember, but it was a huge number. I think it was in the tens of thousands of this leaflet in Pakistan by printing it in a newspaper. And so there's so many ways. So even in Pakistan, this leaflet has been adapted and used on a really large scale as well. So, and then of course for the flood victims, these resources have all been utilized as well. So many connections.
Yes. Well, let's get started again, and we're getting a gradual introduction to Rachel Kalem here. Glad to have you with us, Rachel. She is a professor emerita, psychology and mental health, the University of Manchester. Her research focuses on prevention approaches to protecting the mental health of children, young people, and families. She has a particular interest in developing and evaluating parenting and family skills resources for low and middle income countries and very low resource contexts. She has acted as a consultant and technical expert with the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime Prevention Group on parenting and family skills, and collaborated on new programs which are now in use in many countries worldwide. She has worked most recently on parenting and intervention needs of children, young people, and families living through war, displacement, and resettlement using novel, low-cost ways of sharing information. She has worked with groups internationally on combining caregiver and family skills with trauma recovery approaches for children and young people across these settings. Rachel, we're delighted to have you with us. Over to you.
Thank you very much. And thank you so much for the invitation. And it's been just wonderful to hear the presentations so far. They're so inspiring. So it's really, really big thanks to the speakers so far. If we can move on. And I think the great thing is that speakers so far have covered so many of the points that I'm wanting to talk about that I don't have to go into a lot of detail on quite a few things. What I want to say about parenting really is that it's one of the strongest bodies of evidence that we have in any area of psychological intervention, really. We know that it has great benefits kind of immediately for children, but it also has great benefits in promoting positive trajectories for children over time and for their outcomes as time goes by. We know that it has very powerful preventive effects, and it really is of global significance. And over the last 15 years or so, I think we've seen parenting interventions become much more widely understood globally. And we know that there are common elements that run across effective, good evidence-based programs, and they are to do with helping parents to deploy warmth and effective praise, good listening skills, knowing how to use assertive discipline, and also helping parents to look after themselves. And these are at the core of every good program. Next, please. So how the task, given that we know what needs to be provided, the question then is how we reach parents and caregivers across communities and cultures. Oh, sorry, my battery is suddenly about to run out. I've been plugged in all morning, but it's obviously it's got very excited with the presentations going on. There we go. The challenge then is how we actually reach parents and caregivers in low resource contexts, perhaps where there's very limited access to services and professionals, where there are parents and caregivers who have particular needs, and some of the extreme conditions, for example, that Anna's been talking about with armed conflicts, with complex emergencies and disasters, and really hard to access settings as well. Next. So can we reach people in these kind of stress settings? Can we reach people in complex emergencies? And can approaches be timely? What needs to happen when? And I think Ala's, the pyramid that Ala was showing is really valuable as a way of understanding how we can reach many, many families. And when I talk about parents, again, very much like with Maya's presentation, by parents, I mean anybody looking after children who are acting as de facto parents in some way. Can we share information? Oh, sorry. Can we share information and skills in cost-effective ways? A key question, can we train facilitators who don't have a background in mental health? That's the only way we can get beyond limitations in the numbers of professionals available. Can we combine approaches? And I think I'm going to be talking some examples of this, and I think Nusrat Hussain has given some really nice examples, or demonstrated some really nice examples of ways of combining parenting approaches with other approaches to reach particular groups. And can we reach underserved people? And I really liked Mina's presentation on parenting and serious mental illness, and I'm going to be talking about that a bit as well. So to think about parenting in low and middle income countries, Ala was very kindly speaking about her PhD supervision with me. I've had the joy of working with some wonderful PhD students, and one student who came to me, who I've done some work that's been very important to me, was Anilena Mejia, who came from Panama. And what she wanted to work on was ways of delivering parenting interventions in low resource settings. And she reviewed the literature, and this was in 2012, at a time when there just weren't reviews of parenting programs for low and middle income countries. And we identified only a very small number of papers and went on to undertake a randomized controlled trial. Now, what we were really conscious of was the importance of using an intervention that was really brief, very simple, and didn't need experts to deliver it. And so Anilena worked with parents of children aged 3 to 12 in low resource neighborhoods in Panama. And all that the parents had was a 2-hour discussion group and 2 telephone follow-ups. And the intervention was the Triple P discussion group workbook, which is a brief seminar, a 2-hour seminar. And in the next slide, you'll see Anilena delivering the intervention in Panama to parents. And as the next slide shows, we were really surprised at the size of the changes that she was able to attain with this study. So an effect size of over 1 for behavioural difficulties is a really large effect size. And what's interesting to see is that we also saw parents' depression, anxiety and stress reduce, and changes in their parenting practices. And what's particularly striking is, sorry, if we can just go back to that slide for a moment, is that the changes increased over time. So immediately post seminar, there was positive change, but by 6 months follow-up, there were good effect sizes across all the different measures. Next. And Anilena conducted interviews with parents who'd taken part in the trial and published information about the mechanisms and the cultural appropriateness of the intervention. And I'll just show you one little quote from one parent. I mean, these are very rich papers full of really, really interesting findings. Next, please. But I was very struck by this particular quote from a parent who said, "Now if something happens, I take action. I find a solution. Before I would turn away and leave because I thought there was no solution, but not anymore." So you can really see the change in self-efficacy of this parent. And this is after a 2-hour session. So this really convinced us that there was scope to bring about change through very brief interventions. Next, please. And that has then really informed the thinking that Ala Al-Khani and I did when it came to thinking about parents who are living through conflict and displacement. Because we know that parenting caregiver practices can improve significantly, although, as Alla said, parenting can be very much challenged by the stresses of military conflict and displacement. We know that child adjustment can improve significantly, and we've known for a long time that trauma-informed programs are promising. Next. Alla mentioned the bread wrappers study. This was a piece of research that was just extraordinary to take part in, really. We wrote a leaflet which was in response to the qualitative work that we wrote a leaflet that was in response to the qualitative work that Alla had done with the families on the Turkey-Syria border. And a wonderful charity who was distributing bread from Turkey through into bakeries in conflict areas of Syria said that they could deliver the bread wrappers, the bread in the leaflets in bread wrappers. And so we put in questionnaires and pens with leaflets. And what was really remarkable was that the charity was able to distribute 3,000 leaflets in 2 days, specifically to families with children who were living in these conflict areas. And we gave out questionnaires in the package, and we had an almost 60% return rate, which is an extraordinarily high level of return for questionnaires. Parents brought back their questionnaires and dropped them into boxes when they came for their next bread delivery. And to our astonishment, really, they sent back really positive ratings of the leaflet. They said it was really useful. And they also sent back very positive comments saying, thank you for remembering us. It's good to know somebody's thinking of us. They talked about their challenges and they suggested improvements or what they would like to see. And that's been really has informed our later work. But these resources now have been translated into many different languages. Yeah, dig on to the next one. And are now the links are distributed by a whole range of different organisations, including, for example, the Royal College of Psychiatrists, who distributed it in relation to Ukraine first and then Pakistan, by the Welsh Traumatic Stress Wales and many other organisations. And because the leaflets are available in so many different languages, we've been able to get them out very, very quickly, and people have been willing to volunteer to translate them very, very quickly as well. Next, please. And they form part of the Ukraine Parenting Response Project, which was University of Oxford, UNODC, WHO collaboration, which reckoned to have reached over 11.5 million people who were experiencing the Ukraine crisis. So it shows the level of reach that's possible. Alla talked about this pyramid, so I don't need to talk about that. But to give a little more information about the top of that pyramid, teaching recovery techniques plus parenting, I think this is an example of where we can work with facilitators who aren't necessarily psychologists, who aren't necessarily, who don't have mental health training, but who are able to participate in programs to, and provide facilitation of really closely written and carefully prepared resources. So what we did with Teaching Recovery Techniques, as Alla said, which is a Children of War Foundation program, is to combine it with parenting elements, which really are absolutely consistent with the others in that UNODC pyramid. So with the leaflets, with the conversation groups, with strong families and so on, there's a common thread running through all of those different programs. So we drew up a set of 5 parent sessions, which we ran alongside the 5 children's sessions. Next, please. And we piloted this, first of all, in Turkey with refugee families who had come out from Syria, and then went on to run a randomized controlled trial with support from UNODC and the Children of War Foundation in Lebanon for families who had escaped from Syria. Next, please. And here it was teachers who were already trained in TRT. We trained them with the additional components of the plus parenting components. And what's really striking about this is that there were significant improvements for children with TRT, but also significant additional improvements for children and caregivers across a range of the measures. And so if we can look at the next slides, I'll just give you some examples of what we mean by this. So the children had completed the CRIES measure, which has 3 subscales of intrusion, avoidance, and arousal. And here's an example in relation to intrusion, which is the pattern that we saw in these graphs is absolutely typical across all 3, intrusion, avoidance, and arousal, which is that the children in the TRT group improved significantly more than the children who were on the waiting list. But the children who had TRT plus parenting, so their parents were also participating, showed the quickest reductions and the greatest reductions. And we saw that again and again in relation to their anxiety and their depression as well. So adding the parenting component really seemed to help the children. Next, please. We also measured what had happened to the parents, and what we hadn't really anticipated was that the parents who were taking the TRT plus parenting, they reported greater reductions in their parenting scale scores, also in their depression, anxiety, and their stress levels, and on their own ratings of the impact of events, so their revised total score, so their trauma measure as well. So what we're seeing is additional improvements where we have a combination of a children's trauma-informed program, recovery program, plus a parenting program, and putting them together then helps, I would guess, the whole family. It certainly helps the child and the parent that we worked with, and it's likely that it can have impact for the rest of the family too. Next, please. I want to move now to talk about something a bit different, and I was really interested to hear Mina talking about parenting and serious mental illness, because this is an area that I've also been very interested in over a number of years, because parents who have serious mental illness have been so very neglected by the research, by services as well. And I think partly because certainly in the UK, the way that children's services and parent and adult services are so separate means that there's a lack of recognition really of the importance of the interconnection between the two, parents' mental health and children's mental health. So that one of the joys of working at Manchester has been working alongside very large numbers of academics who are working on serious mental health difficulties, particularly psychosis. And I suppose it was natural that I would gravitate to working alongside them when I started thinking about parenting and serious mental illness. We know that children's needs often go unrecognised. Most of the research is on parenting and depression, particularly in the child around birth and in the child's early years. And there's much less on, for example, parenting with bipolar disorder or schizophrenia and psychosis. And I was one of a group that reviewed the literature in a review led by Penny B in 2014, which showed really how very minimal the literature is on community-based interventions for improving, maintaining quality of life for children of parents with serious mental illness. Okay, next one. I started working with Steve Jones, who was at Manchester, on trying to use parenting information for parents with bipolar disorder. And we worked in collaboration with Matt Sanders and the Triple P Positive Parenting Programme to put together a joint intervention. And we ran a pilot study, next please, which then went on to sorry, can we go back one? Yeah, so we ran a pilot study which seemed to be helpful for parents. And then we ran a much bigger randomized controlled trial. It was all online. And what we saw was improvements in parents' mental health through using an approach that focused on their children. So yeah, let's go on to the next slide. So we then took this into the field of psychosis, and I've worked with particularly Lindsay Gregg, Annie Witkowski, and the studies were led by Lauren Wolfenden, who did a PhD with me. And she did a very interesting case series where she tried the Triple P Positive Parenting Programme, a self-directed version. So all the parent gets is a handbook which runs through session by session how to change your child's behaviour through positive parenting. And what Lauren did was she identified families where there was a parent with psychosis, and after doing lots of baseline measurements, then shared the booklet with them. She didn't teach them about parenting, she just sat with them and helped them read through and understand the different components of the parenting programs. And so she was, so she was just acting as a guide. So she was doing that. She was a psychology graduate, but she wasn't trained specifically in parenting approaches or in intervention. She was going there as a helper, and that was her role. Next, please. And so this was a supported self-directed intervention using the Triple P Self-Help Workbook. And she worked with 10 mothers. We did engage a couple of fathers, but they dropped out very early on. They had children aged between 3 and 10 years. They were all experiencing psychosis. 6 with schizophrenia, 4 with paranoid schizophrenia. 9 of them were single parents, 9 of them were unemployed, and all of them were struggling financially. So these were parents who were really having a tough time of it. And 5 of them completed all 10 sessions that the workbook took them through. And then there was follow-up at 3 and 6 months. And we saw some really interesting findings. So the IBEG Child Behaviour Inventory was our main outcome measure. And as you can see, the intensity scores really generally show a trend of dropping down. So even for the parents who dropped out, most of them, you can see that the graphs are going in the right direction, and parents are reporting their children's behaviour as much less problematic by the end of the intervention, the follow-up period, than they were at the beginning. Next, please. What we hadn't expected, but were very excited to see, was the changes that there were for at least some of the parents in their mental health difficulties. So we used the CIRATS hallucination score, and you can see for some of them, there's a really quite marked drop in their scores for hallucinations. So taking part in a parenting intervention has helped their mental health. The next one. And similarly for delusions, you can see the downward trend for most of the parents. So I think that this reinforces really the notion of, first of all, helping parents to parent more effectively, which is going to reduce their stress levels. A lot of the parents at the beginning said that they were saying that parenting was one of the biggest stressors and one of the greatest causes of their concerns and their day-to-day hassles. And Lauren undertook some qualitative interviews afterwards, and there was a really nice quote from more than one parent actually saying, you know, I wasn't a mum, or I was a new mum afterwards, which really rang bells for me with the parent that Annie Lehner had interviewed in Panama, who said, you know, I used not to know what to do, but now I know what to do. And a feeling that they've changed, that they're able to parent differently. And so instead of feeling hopeless and lost and a bad parent, they felt better afterwards. They they really liked using behaviour charts. They found descriptive praise and consistency with ground rules really helpful. They said that they felt more actively engaged and described many positive changes. They said they looked forward to spending time with their child rather than trying to find alternative care. There was one lovely comment about how one of them was taking her children to the pictures now, and that she'd not taken them to the cinema before. And some described it as transformative. Some of them saying they felt calm, they felt like a new mum, they were smiling, laughing, coping, and that their children were happier and more affectionate. So you can really see a positive spiral that has now started to develop within the family. They said they looked at the book when they needed a reminder. That's exactly what the parents in Anne Elena's study in Panama said. If they couldn't work out what to do, they just went back to the book and they looked at it and they found it helpful. And the parents said that the support alongside the book was invaluable. And we now have funding to run a much larger study of this. So Lindsay Gregg is leading on that. So let's move to thinking globally and how we can deploy these sorts of approaches and how these sorts of approaches fit when we're faced with something like the terrible, terrible floods in Pakistan, the earthquakes that affected people who had already been affected by the Syrian conflict, for example. How can we use these approaches to help? And I think what I hope I'm demonstrating so far is that we can have approaches that are really relatively light touch or don't need experts to provide them, which parents really value and which do seem to make a difference to their parenting. It does seem to help to strengthen them. The next, please. And I really like a model which is based on the original Bronfenbrenner model of ecology and bioecological model of development, which Ereklian and Agar reviewed in, I think it was 2021. And they talk about mental health and psychosocial well-being of refugee children and how we can think about the child, we think about the familial factors, and then how important it is to think through community factors and institutional and policy factors. And I think that one thing that we underestimate at our peril really is the importance of those institutional, national and international actors who can make such a difference for families. Next one, please. Sorry, could you just go back one? Yeah. And I think we have a really interesting illustration of that that's come through in the Ukraine conflict. And that is what a couple of authors have called the Zelensky effect. Next. And what Zelensky has done as a national leader, he has really encouraged Ukrainians to rally around the flag. He's rallied international opinion, and he's shown really clear, explicit values, which he conveys all the time through social media. Next, please. And I think this is a different experience which you can compare to other armed conflicts and displacements, for example. In many cases where children are displaced by war and conflict, the leadership of the country shows little concern for their well-being, or may actively, it shows little concern for their well-being. Whereas in Ukraine, they've shown enormous concern for children and families. There's been tremendous reach of communications and engagement with the population wherever they are. There's central organisations to make sure children can access education wherever they're living in the world. And there's a really clear sense of home and a welcome waiting back in Ukraine as soon as possible. And I think we really need to take these sorts of levels of these sorts of national issues into consideration when we're planning intervention, and also when we think about research, because we know that conflicts and emergencies and flight aren't going away, and we need to really build communities that have knowledge and strengths. There was I was reading a Médecins Sans Frontières leaflet that came through the door yesterday, and there was a a quote from somebody working in Ukraine saying, "Oh, they've underestimated the resilience of our grandmothers. You know, our babushkas are really important figures." That sense of strength that we can help, countries can really help with. And there are different stages where we can really, through our actions, help to build strengths. Before there's some sort of conflict, or when trouble is brewing, parents tend to become very anxious and they become particularly warm and overprotective of their children. That's a really prime teachable moment for families, when it would be possible to really work on ways of building resilience and preparing families for what might lie ahead. During conflict, families need specific advice through conflict, like displacement and resettlement. And thinking about resettlement, it's not just all the things that happen in the healthcare services and social care services and educational services and so on that families will encounter where they then settle. There's the additional element, which is when fathers, for example, let's think about Ukraine, when fathers who've experienced military conflict may return to the family showing signs of post-traumatic stress, which can impose a whole additional layer of pressure for families who are trying to already cope with a whole range of different difficulties. But I think, to answer the questions that I set out at the beginning, we really can reach people in low resource, stressed and humanitarian settings. I hope we've demonstrated that. We can reach people in complex emergencies, even in the middle of earthquakes and in conflict zones. Using the right approaches, we can be timely. If we think about what sorts of resources people need, we can get those in there. We can share information and skills in cost-effective ways, and we can train facilitators who don't have a background in mental health and still see good, strong results in our research. We can combine approaches, and I think there are many examples of that. I mean, learning through play plus trauma-informed programs for children. We can reach underserved people. We've been able to demonstrate that as well. And we can do this across diverse contexts and have benefits for children and parents and build resilience. And we can help families in many diverse settings around the world. So thank you very much to you all for listening, and thank you very much to all my collaborators, all the wonderful people I've worked with on in developing and evaluating these resources. Thank you.
Rachel, thank you very much. I can see why people want to work with you, and it is a very inspiring presentation you've given us. And there's been lots we don't have time for questions, but there are a lot of interest. You can tell on the chat that people want to take a look at the presentation and see if they can adapt it to their environment. Thank you again very much, Rachel. Naseem will introduce our next speaker. Naseem.
Thank you, Andrew. It's my absolute joy to introduce Dr. Ishrat Hussain. Ishrat is a young, dynamic academic, researcher, and clinician. He is head of the Clinical Trials Unit and lead of the Moods Disorder Service at Center for Addiction and Mental Health. He is an associate professor in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Toronto. He holds a Tier 2 Canada Research Chair in Treatment Innovation in Mood Disorders, and his research program focuses on advancing the understanding and treatment of mood disorders across populations. Welcome, Ishrat.
Thank you, Professor Chaudhry, for the kind introduction. And it's great to see an entire event focused on parental mental health. It's something that's particularly relevant for me at this moment, as I see my brother adapt to becoming a new father and the emotions involved with that. So I'm here actually to talk to you about a really interesting program of research and implementation that we have been developing, and it's really a tri-continental collaboration between Canada, the United Kingdom and Pakistan, working closely with the Pakistan Institute of Living and Learning and colleagues like Andrew here in Toronto. We have developed a psychosocial integrated intervention for depressed fathers, and I'm here to talk to you about our journey through the development and implementation of this intervention, which is called Learning Through Play plus DADS. And the reason really we wanted to focus on this often under-researched and clinically neglected area of study is because of the prevalence of depression in men. This is just some recent data collected from higher income countries, suggesting that 1 in 10 men will experience some form of depression or anxiety, but less than half seek treatment. These numbers are substantially higher in low and middle income countries, including Pakistan, where the prevalence rate is nearly as high as 42% in men. And this is due to a number of factors, including cultural sort of stigmas attached to seeking out treatment, the mental health treatment gap that exists in these settings, as well as local factors such as economic disparities. But why are men generally less likely to speak up and get treatment? You may have heard statements like tough it out, man up, often colloquially thrown around, but really it speaks to gender norms and cultural aspects that exist across cultures and populations. There's often this expectation, particularly in patriarchal societies like Pakistan, that men are primarily the bread earners for the family, and particularly it's the mums who are responsible for child rearing and for keeping the home. It's often thought that men don't get depressed, they can't be sad, boys don't cry, and that boys should be going out, making friends, whereas girls are expected to remain at home, often not even go to school in some parts of the world, and help out in household chores. So all of these gender norms and cultural expectations can often lead to men not seeking out for help when they are suffering. And then the concept of gender equality often applied to one gender only, but really it is not only an issue that relates to women, it's an issue that relates to all genders, transgender individuals, men as well. So it's a societal issue, and we all have a role to play in achieving it. So really following the work that was conducted in mothers by the Pakistan Institute of Learning and Living through the cultural adaptation and investigation of learning through play, combined with aspects of CBT through the Thinking Healthy program, it showed great improvement in improving maternal depression in Pakistani mothers, and also improving child social emotional development outcomes. But during those studies, we found that actually the fathers were very interested in taking part in the intervention as well. And doing some community engagement with these fathers, we recognized that actually there was quite a high prevalence of depression within Pakistani fathers as well. And this led to the development of further adapting learning through play, combining it with cognitive behavioral therapy aspects, and really focusing it and adapting it to fathers. And so we published a pilot study 2 years ago, looking at the feasibility and acceptability of learning through play plus DADS, which is a multi-generational integrated intervention. It combines a focus on parental mental health and child development. The picture that you see on the right here is actually a pictorial calendar of the learning through play plus DAD intervention. And really unique aspects of it include addressing the stigma in local populations, and really focusing it as a training rather than a therapy or treatment, with the eventual hope to integrate it with digital technology. And in our pilot work, we found that actually it was highly feasible, really acceptable by the depressed fathers, and showed improvement in depressive symptom severity as measured by the Hamilton Depression Rating Scale. We then expanded this work, and we've conducted an exploratory trial in over 300 fathers with depression. To our knowledge, this is the largest clinical trial of an intervention for depressed fathers. And again, in that study, we found that there were improvements in depressive symptoms, as well as improvements in attachments with children in fathers. And that study is being prepared for publication presently. So with that sort of development of this preliminary data, we applied to the very supportive funders at Grand Challenges Canada, who funded the initial exploratory trial as well. And we applied to their Transition to Scale program, really to scale up and implement learning through play plus dads across the city of Karachi, which is really the financial and urban center of Pakistan, with a population of almost 23 million, according to official figures. Unofficially, figures may be as high as 30 million. And so we really were ambitious with this project. We wanted to deliver learning through play plus dads to almost 3,000 fathers with depression. And we wanted to include their partners in this as well, so that all mums were also offered learning through play as part of our study. And there was a real focus on capacity building and kind of integrating this intervention into training in the local healthcare architecture. So we know that in Pakistan, community health workers are key in delivering health interventions to families. And so a part of our work also focused on training almost 4,000 community health workers across the country of Pakistan. And this is some of the progress that we've made so far. We've recruited over 2,900 fathers. We've almost completed follow-up in half of that sample. And again, in the partners as well, we had a really great uptake. Almost 2,600 mothers took part and agreed to take part in the study, and almost half have completed the study as well. Next slide, please. As part of this, we also wanted to get some qualitative feedback on the value of learning through play plus, and we've conducted qualitative interviews with fathers, mothers, as well as other stakeholders, including community health workers, researchers, and other stakeholders in the community as well, such as primary healthcare physicians. Some of the preliminary qualitative findings are that we have seen reported improvements in mood, increased interest in daily activities, improvements in thinking style, increased attachment and bonding with children, improved relationships with family members, increased support of dads towards their mothers, improvement in hygiene generally within the home, as well as improvements in the home environment. And these are some qualitative excerpts from fathers that engaged with LTP plus dads in this large trial. So you can see here a father reporting that previously I was worried about my work and finances, and due to these stressors, I was feeling low and depressed. After attending these sessions, I'm feeling happy and less worried about my work and other stressors. I'm trying to improve my thinking style and taking interest in my life. I'm also spending more time with my child. I do play and take care of him. He's also feeling happy and excited. Previously, due to my anger outbursts, my children were fearful of me. And now I'm trying to control aggression, at least in front of my children. Next slide. And again, this is a more report from fathers about improved knowledge and awareness about parenting practices. A participant reported that after attending these sessions, I got to know the role of the father in parenting. Previously, I was only trying to fulfill financial needs and basic necessities of the child. But now I know that fathers should be equally involved in parenting as a mother, like taking care of the child, playing and feeding. And then another participant said, I was not communicating to the baby. I did not know that talking to the baby stimulates child development and helps in facilitating child learning. I talk to my baby now, and I also emphasize and remind his mother to leave the house chores and give time to the baby. Next slide. So really moving findings actually from some of that qualitative work, but also really rewarding to see the uptake in terms of the training for this intervention. We've already trained over 400 facility-based health workers. So these are people like mental health nurses, psychologists, and so on. And then non-facility based workers, we mean community health workers. We've trained over 2,000 of those so far, as well as teachers. We've managed to train around 43 teachers as well. And that capacity building work is going to continue over the next year. We've been doing a lot of community engagement and awareness as well to try and raise awareness of parental mental health, and specifically mental health in fathers. And these are some of our community engagement programs across the country. We've worked a lot with media, TV, radio, as well as spiritual leaders and mosques and so on to try and raise awareness. Next slide, please. And these are just some of our partners, major media outlets, including leading television channels, newspapers. We've created a newsletter through the Pakistan Institute of Living and Learning that we disseminate frequently. And we've also been working with our partners across the world, here in Toronto, at the university, as well as at CAMH, to increase visibility of our work as well. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ishrat. It's good to see you again, and it's good to hear an update from last year. Sounds like things are going very well, and it's lovely. I can sense that this getting dads involved is a great initiative, and I'm glad that you and your team are doing the work. I think what we need to do, again, questions, Ishrat will try to get back to you with specific questions if you have, but I think we need to move on to the next presentation. And this is our last presentation of day one, and then Naseem will have some closing comments. But I'd like to introduce for our next presentation, Dr. Brandy Hawk, who earned her PhD in clinical and developmental psychology from the University of Pittsburgh. She is currently a licensed psychologist and co-leader in the Anti-Racism, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee at the Care Center within the UC Davis Children's Hospital. She is a co-developer of Parent-Child Care, or PC Care, and a trainer of both PC Care and Parent-Child Interaction Therapy. She is the clinical manager of programs providing nationwide PC Care training and development and offering PC Care services for children to improve the quality of visits with reunifying parents and relationships with resource parents. She has also co-developed and staffs an integrated healthcare clinic for children with chronic pain. Current research interests include the effectiveness of didactic interventions in the treatment of trauma and disruptive behavior disorders. Welcome, Brandy. Over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm so thankful to be here this morning with you all. Wonderful presentations so far. I am so very thankful to be able to share a little bit of our work with you all. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about Parent-Child Care, which is a brief intervention for caregivers and children. Next slide, please. Thank you. So a brief intro on me. My clinical and research work has focused on caregiver-child relationships. As a graduate student, I worked on interventions in orphanages in Russia. I saw someone brought up the importance of considering children in institutions, and I could not agree more. I was part of an amazing team that was able to make changes in some of those institutions and research what that did for children long term. I also have been on the other side looking at the impact of those changes in institutionalization once children are adopted, both within their own country and internationally. And then I went on to be trained in parent-child interaction therapy for traumatized children. And through that came the development of Parent-Child Care. But I cannot talk about any of this without talking about my whole team. So the developers of PC Care are my amazing colleagues, Susan Timmer and Lindsay Armandaris. And we do lots of observations of parents and children, and we couldn't have developed that coding system without our colleague Deanna Boys. And none of it would work without the research, training, and admin support of Colleen Allen, Aubrey Johnson, and Alexis Servan. So I'm going to do a very brief overview, history of how it came about, what is it, and then talk about some of the effectiveness. Next slide, please. So PC Care was developed in 2016 at a child trauma clinic. So everything about it is based in the understanding of the impact of trauma on children and their parents. What we see in research and what we saw at our clinic was a very high prevalence rate for externalizing behaviors, especially in 2 to 10-year-olds. We see that children who have experienced trauma, whether that is a single instance of abuse or chronic experiences of trauma, are often presenting with externalizing behaviors. And we see that for physically abusive families, physical abuse most often happens within the context of discipline. But for those families who need it most, it's really hard to access services. These are things that everyone has been talking about so far. There are not enough providers to be able to see all of the children and families that want to be seen. And we see that once children do participate in parenting interventions, the attrition rates are as high as 50% or higher. So all of this led us to say we need briefer interventions that teach effective parenting skills. And so that's where we developed PC Care from. So we're all researchers, so we started in research. My colleague, Dr. Timmer, had recently published an article that looked at parent-child interaction therapy, which is a about 20-week intervention. And she found that most of the gains in parenting occurred in the first 7 weeks. So parents were supposed to stick it out for 20 long weeks. More than half of them ended early, but regardless of when they ended, the majority of their gains occurred in just those first 7 weeks. And we looked at research meta-analyses that looked at the most important parts of effective parenting interventions are that they're teaching positive parenting and discipline skills, the exact same skills that have been spoken about today. And they involve active coaching of the parent and the child, and they give homework, so something to do to practice and take this home. Next slide, please. Thanks. But all of the research in the world cannot replace actual clinical work. And so it was in working with families that we developed some of these core tenets that I'd really like to help everyone think about as you're thinking about interventions, which is that we need our interventions to allow for and celebrate diversity. We can't do things that force people into boxes, but we need to think about what their actual values are and support them in these strengths and values. We want to bring children in as active participants. This was direct feedback from families saying, why can't my kid learn these skills? And we're like, yeah, absolutely. Your child should be learning these skills also. We see that we need to incorporate regulation in parenting interventions if we're going to support families who have experienced trauma. And we know that not all skills are right for all families. And so if we teach only 2 or 3 skills and say this is what's going to work for everyone, we're going to miss what's best for a lot of other families. And so we consistently took feedback from families to change and develop this program. And as Dr. Callum said earlier today, one of the most important things for us was that non-licensed paraprofessionals should be able to do this. We could not rely on mental health therapists to be the people that are the only ones giving these treatments. So brief overview, what is it? PC Care is a 7-session dyadic intervention for 1 to 10-year-olds and their caregivers. So there's 1 pre-treatment assessment session and then 6 treatment sessions. And then we take a 1-month break to allow families to incorporate everything into their lives and check in again a month later. We are always keeping the child and parent involved. So kids are learning all of the skills. We are fostering relationships and fostering conversations between parents and children. And it's all within the context of play. The value of play for children cannot be overstated. And every single week we teach skills and then immediately coach the family to use those skills in session, which is a great outcome of adult learning theory, that people do best when they learn and then immediately practice. And then we do daily homework. So we assign families to spend time together every day, find 5 minutes to play and practice the skills throughout the day. And throughout all of this, we're helping the family find what works best for them so that they can say, this is what works for us. I'm going to keep doing this moving forward. Next slide. So the goals of PC Care are to promote healthy caregiver-child relationships and reduce difficult and disruptive behaviors through 3 mechanisms: increasing positive communication, supporting self-regulation and coping skills, and teaching effective behavior management strategies. Very briefly, the intervention is brief and structured. It's a 50-minute session. We start with a check-in. We review behaviors each week so that parents can see improvement from week to week. And we review how their homework went. We spend 10 minutes teaching new skills, and then we observe the parent and child together to see how things are going. We spend the majority of session doing live coaching. So therapist is there or provider is there on the floor with the family, helping them play together. And then we check out, we review progress, we assign the next week's homework, and we are always assessing motivation and seeing what's working best for the family. This is an overview of the skills we teach from session 1 through session 6. And see, in session 1, we start with our positive communication foundation, and we teach things like how to adjust the environment to make life easier for you and your family, teach transitions. In session 2, we add on the importance of calming, co-regulation, selective attention, redirecting modeling. In session 3, we add on rules, choices, when then, if then statements. Session 4, we teach effective commands and giving consistent consequences. Session 5, we talk about redoing, importance of admitting mistakes and fixing them, and recovery. And then in session 6, we put it all together and see what works. And PC Care was designed to be adaptable. So we took all this feedback from families, we designed this 7-week intervention, and there's just no way that it can be perfect for everybody. So we already have a number of appendices. We have an appendix and adaptation for toddlers, for children with neurodevelopmental disorders, children with problematic sexual behaviors, children with physical health conditions, those with feeding or eating concerns. We recently developed a protocol for families during visits. So these are for families that are involved in the child welfare system and the children have been removed from their parents. And so we're working during their visits to support positive interactions, to support having a good time during their visits, with the ultimate goal of hoping that that leads towards greater reunification. And we are developing cultural adaptations. So I'm thrilled to be working with the team at Pakistan Institute of Living and Learning to better understand how PC Care can be changed and adapted for the families in Pakistan. We're also working with the International Rescue Committee to identify ways that we can change PC Care so that it's more effective and helpful for refugees in the United States. And we are always open to collaborate and find new adaptations. And currently, because we are in California, everything is in Spanish. So what does this look like over time? We did a research study of PC Care in the foster care system. So we are looking at 1 to 5-year-olds and their foster parents. This was considered a preventive service, so no one had to be referred. It was offered to every single child in the foster care system. And what we found over time is that with just these 7 weeks, children's overall behaviors improved. So their positive or protective factors were increasing. They had more initiative, they had better relationships with their caregivers. Caregivers reported better self-regulation, and behavior problems reduced. You can see this orange line is the WACB score, which is our weekly assessment of child behavior. And you see this nice line of these difficult behaviors reducing. But I think what we are most proud of with this study and most surprised and floored by is this bottom graph that looks at where children are living 1 and 6 months after completing PC Care. And we see that 1 month after completing PC Care, almost 100% of the children were in their same foster placement compared to those who did not complete. And then even 6 months out, we can see the number of children that stayed in the same placement is so much higher than it is for those who did not complete. So the ability to create more stability for these kids was just truly amazing for us. Next slide. So we took that and we did a randomized control trial of PC Care versus a wait list. This was within the context of primary care. So again, we didn't want this to be a fully mental health treatment intervention. This was something that was available to all children referred by their primary care physicians. We did not need to give diagnoses for this. And we can see in this first graph that we used the behavioral assessment scale for children. And you can see that the externalizing scores for children who participated in PC Care came down below the clinical line versus the wait list. And same thing for the parent total stress. So parenting stress decreased for children who participated in PC Care. And the opposite is also true. So the adaptive functioning, children's ability to engage in the world and engage in positive behaviors also increased for those who participated. And in the second graph, you can see the clinical scores. So in blue, we have children who are in the normative range of externalizing behaviors. In yellow, we have children who are considered at risk. And then in pink, we have children who are in the clinically significant range for externalizing behaviors. And we can see from pre to post treatment, those in PC Care, we no longer had any in the clinically significant range, and 60% were in the normative range. Versus the wait list, actually we see fewer children remaining in the normative range after the wait list period. Fine, thank you. And so we said, this is great. We were really excited and wanted to continue to do research to see how we can make PC Care better. But we also wanted to make sure that it was as effective or doing what it was supposed to do in comparison to other treatments that already existed. And so we also do research on PCIT in our facility. So we looked at that data and we looked at treatment retention for children in PCIT versus those in PC Care. Because again, we wanted to reduce that attrition rate. And we found that the number of kids who completed treatment was significantly higher in PC Care. This is that blue line in the first graph. And even after 7 weeks, right, because PCIT is around 20 weeks long, and so that's not really a fair comparison. So we broke it down to just 7 weeks. Who actually completes that? And those who did PC Care completed 7 weeks at a higher rate than those who were engaged in PCIT. And the flip is true for those that dropped early and those who were assessed but actually never started treatment. And then we looked at outcomes as well. And we looked at outcomes over the first 7 weeks of the intervention. So the full PC Care intervention versus the first half of treatment for PCIT. And we saw that for PC Care, the behavior problems dropped significantly more than they did during the first half of treatment for PCIT. And we see the same thing for parenting stress, actually much more significant. A much greater effect size for parenting stress, where parents were feeling significantly less stressed after PC Care, but after that first half of PCIT, it was pretty similar. So why are we doing, like, why do we think this is true? I'm going to highlight some of the things that others said as well. I think that learning new skills is motivating. Parents and children, when they have something to look forward to every week, what am I going to learn next? Like, that's motivating to keep doing it. We have an emphasis on coaching and pointing out the strengths of the family and the child, and that's motivating too. So being strengths-based gives people hope and helps them feel good about themselves. I think 7 weeks feels a little doable for families, more so than other treatments. And throughout, we give families choice, and so part of that is to increase motivation and confidence. Another hypothesis actively including children. So this is something that is really important to us. And I think that it could encourage communication and shared responsibility in the family. So everyone's on the same page, everyone's working towards the same goal. And the adaptability that we have, adaptability through the different appendices, but also adaptability within session to focus on what the family wants to focus on, allows parents to feel heard and to actually work on their goals and feel like they're making progress on what they are working on. So some brief conclusions here. Parent-child relationships are critical for children's mental health. I didn't need to actually tell any of you that, you all know it, but it's so important to remember. And we know that parenting interventions are effective, but struggle with attrition. This is why the interventions that have been spoken about so far that are brief, even one session, are amazing because attrition happens so quickly. And so PC Care is a brief dyadic intervention that supports relationships and teaches effective parenting skills and is effective. So brief interventions can improve behaviors, as we've seen earlier, as we've seen here, and outcomes in various settings, and they're more likely to be completed. Things work better when people finish them and when they feel a sense of accomplishment after finishing them. So given the current mental health crisis and long waiting lines, I really do think that brief interventions like PC Care, like those interventions that were spoken about earlier, are particularly helpful for our families. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brandy, for the good work you and your team are doing, and how you're making connections to what's happening else throughout the world as well, and some of these same focus, and well done. I think we have some time for questions. First of all, for Brandy, and then we'll take a couple questions there if some have come in, Rabia, and then if there's time, we'll take other questions from about other presentations. But we'll start. Rabia, is there any questions that you're able to ask for Brandy?
Andrew, we have not received any questions in chat for now.
Okay, I see that she's received a lot of affirmation.
Yeah. Yes.
And I think that as with others, people are saying, we want to get hold of your presentation, and is it being adaptable? Is it adaptable to this and that? And so, and I noticed, Brandy, that you're working with PIL there to see about adaptations, and that's a wonderful organization, and I think you'll find it very interesting to work along with them. So, well done. Rabia, before we go to Nazim for some closing comments, is there any questions that from other presentations or from other presenters that you want to ask?
No, Andrew, we have not. Just we have received few comments for Ala for their material, if it's accessible. So Ala has responded.
Okay.
Yeah. So we can take care if anyone wants to ask question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, were you speaking to me?
No, Ala, we had just some comments from the participants on your material, if the material is accessible.
Oh yeah, I've shared all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have
So just a reminder again that the presentations both today and tomorrow will be available to you. And so Rabia will be the one that organizes this, as well as the streaming of the presentations. And we think that some of them, in fact, maybe all of them, will be good for staff training or comparing, comparing your program to others and how they might be working together. And so I think we've had a very rich series of presentations this morning, and you'll be happy to know that tomorrow, I don't know whether it can get any better, but it's going to be good. We know that. And so it'll be the same time tomorrow, but we'll have some closing comments by Nasim.
Andrew, Lynn wants to ask.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Lynn. Yes, Lynn Jones. You're muted, Lynn. Yeah.
No, really great presentations, all of them. I just have a question. I sort of put it in the chat, but it wasn't in question form. Is anybody trying to work in many of the countries in which I've worked? There are many institutionalized children working in very bad situations and living in very bad situations. And I'm wondering if anybody's applying these interventions with institutional staff and what the outcomes are. I mean, for example, it's 10 years ago, but I used the LTP intervention in Haiti after the earthquake, and most of the children that we worked with were orphaned or Restavek children or children living in orphanages. We were very popular in Haiti. We weren't that keen on them ourselves, but we therefore worked with institutional staff because it seemed very important. Is anybody doing this?
If I might respond here, with regard to, first of all, hi Lynn, it's lovely to connect with you. With regard to family skills work, I'm speaking on behalf of our work at UNODC. We have applied the Strong Families program in Mexico with children who are in orphanages. Also in Colombia with children who are institutionalized in prisons and who are living there with their caregivers. In Egypt, there was also attempts at children who were in institutions as well, such as prisons as well. So though this program is focused and aimed at children who are living with their primary caregivers, as there's a lack of programs that support institution staff, we have applied this program to where we have absolutely had to because there was nothing else, and we've had good results. No published research, but some qualitative data.
And can I also add, Lynn, that we've only just started work in Pakistani prisons, both in the women's and adolescents. So again, this is something that we'll be very interested in to start some work with young mums who've got their children living with them in prisons in Pakistan.
There was also some SFP research quite a while back of SFP 10 to 16, which was done with children in prisons with their caregivers as well.
Any other comments on
The
that?
difference with institutional staff is that they're not the caregiver, or they often you have a high child, 10 children to one caregiver, the children are passing through, the caregiver, it really needs a lot of work with the caregiver to develop that parental relationship. But I think it's really important because these children are in a really bad situation.
It's interesting you mentioned that because one of the add-ons that we're planning for Strong Families this year is to have almost a guidance document where if you really have to use Strong Families in that context, how you might adapt it. So yeah, you've encouraged that idea even more now for something like that.
Well, the video from Ukraine, which I used in my teaching the course last year, I do a course on mental health and complex emergencies, but it's very disturbing. And I understand that it's a difficult situation in Ukraine, but I've seen similar situations across, unfortunately, a lot of Eastern Europe. Institutionalized children are really in a hard situation, so, and especially if they're disabled.
We have time for one more question or clarification.
Maya has.
Yes, Maya.
I would just like to say that being in institutional care for 74 years, we are really now looking at a lot of back tracing and talking to a lot of the children that what was it? And Lynn was very right about the fact that, caregivers, they come and go. It may not be the same person during the life of the child. And we are doing an important study on that and over a 20-year period, and now looking at what is happening with them outside and what they can remember, so that we could make these kind of changes and also share with other orphanages, because Balamandir has been running the orphanage for the past 74 years. So we've gone through. Yes, Lynn, thank you so much for putting it, because I think the parenting by a caregiver, that was the point that you made. They are not the natural parents, and they don't necessarily come because they love children and that's what they want to do. And yet we have to try and get the best out of them if our children have to do well. Anyway, our children come with trauma, and children in Balamandir come in below the age of 6. That is so we take them in as babies and toddlers, whereas other institutions take them at 5 and 6. So very often we don't even know the trauma they've gone through. It's been quite a point, and I think we've really taken up that research a little more. seriously, I'm so glad it was brought up. So let us see by maybe next year something we will be able to share with you.
Thank you, Maya.
Yeah, that is something.
Okay, well, Naseem, why don't you give us our closing comments, and then that'll help us wrap up for today.
I mean, I really don't have words, Andrew. What an amazing day.
Yeah, truly.
First day of our conference has been absolutely amazing, brilliant presentations. I've just dotted some points, starting with Maya, I mean, sharing her parenting innovations with community-based approaches, difficult to reach groups, diverse cultures, cultural adaptation in different age groups. Maya, I know Rabia and Pakpil is in contact with you because we want to use these resources. We want to bring them to Pakistan as well.
Yeah, everything is available for you anytime you want it. India is very happy to share just about anything.
Thank you so much.
And learn from all of you too, because I've learned so much over the years.
I think this is what this conference does. I mean, just now with Lynn suggesting this, already we are thinking about that, yes, this is a huge gap that we have with institutionalized children. So moving on, again, Minna's work, severe mental illness, depressed parents, psychotic parents.
Yes,
we'll be very keen to find out how her work progresses. And hopefully in the next year's conference, she'll be able to give us some feedback. And I just can't commend Ala and Professor Callum on the amazing work that they're doing across the globe, building resilience in war zones, conflict areas. And I'm so glad that we are jointly now working with PIL, and this work is being brought in Pakistan. So, and the bread wrapper, I mean, I'm in love with that idea, and it's so easy. It can be done anywhere in any conflict area, but amazing, amazing presentations and so emotionally moving as well. All of those pictures, very, very emotionally moving, but just knowing that there's help and things can improve makes a big difference. So thank you both. And then we had Ishrat talk about depressed men, depressed dads. And he mentioned that this is a patriarchal society, Pakistan. So parenting interventions in men, even in high-income countries, are far and few. So to have recruited the numbers they have in a society where men feel it's a sign of weakness if they seek help for mental health problems is absolutely amazing. Again, really looking forward to next year when Ishrat can come back and tell us how the study has finally progressed to. Brandy, your work on parent-child care and how a brief and structured intervention can help children and families. So much we can learn from. So Andrew has already said, we've got another exciting day tomorrow, same time. We look forward to having all of you there. I just want to end by thanking all the participants, all your active engagement in the chats. So we hope to see all of you there tomorrow. A big thank you to Andrew for leading on the Global Parenting Group and these conferences. Thank you to Rabia for all the excellent organizational and admin responsibilities that you've done remarkably so well. And finally, a thank you to PIL team for supporting this conference today. So from my end, thank you, the presenters, the participants, and everybody else who's been involved. It has been lovely, lovely. I've learned so much. So thank you, everybody.
Nicely done, Naseem. Nicely pulled together and getting us ready for tomorrow as well. So tomorrow, same time, we'll look forward to seeing you there. And one thing I noticed today is that we did not have time for many questions in between the presentations, which is fine. because a lot of the comments were, wonderful presentation, and I want to get hold of it. How can this be done in Fiji? And, lots of wonderful comments. And so I don't know how it'll go tomorrow, but we'll try to see if we can get some questions in between. But if not, be sure that your questions will be responded to at some point. So thanks again, and we'll see you tomorrow, same time. Okay?
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.